The gravel road off Route 12 ran about a quarter-mile before the trees opened up and the house came into view. And even from that distance, I could tell the assignment sheet had undersold it. Large Victorian, the file said. 3 stories, 12 acres, outbuildings not included in scope. What the file didn't say was that the place looked built to be seen from a distance and never approached. I slowed the car down without meaning to. I parked in front, gathered my laptop bag and case folder, and gave myself the usual minute before going in. 12 acres of open field ran out behind the house toward a tree line of bare maples, gray already this late in October, and the sky over all of it was the flat pewter color that just sits there in Vermont from now until April. I've done probate inventories for going on 9 years for the firm out of Burlington, and there's a rhythm to the first minute at a new property. You look at the exterior, you get a feel for the scale, you tell yourself it's just another week of work. I told myself that. I was wrong about the week part almost as soon as I opened the front door. The front hall was full. Not cluttered, full the way a warehouse is full. Furniture stacked against furniture, a settee turned on its side to make room for a bookcase, a mounted deer head propped on the floor because there was nowhere left on the walls. I moved into the front parlor and it was the same story. Chairs 3 deep, a stack of crated items along one wall that had never been opened. The crate slats still nailed shut. 2 clocks on that wall alone, one stopped at 10 after 4, the other at just past 9. Neither of them agreeing with the actual time or with each other. I'd find more of those as the day went on. Not one matching pair in the whole house, as far as I ever saw. I did the math standing right there in the parlor doorway. A normal estate this size, I'd budget 3 days, 4 if the owner was a collector. This was going to run a week at minimum, and that was assuming nothing behind door 1 turned into 3 more doors. I carried my bag through to the dining room. Since the table there was clear enough to work from, once I moved a box of what turned out to be unused canning jars onto the floor. I set up the laptop, squared my paperwork into a stack, and took a photo of the table itself before I touched anything else. Then I opened the log and typed in the property address, the assignment date, the file number my supervisor had assigned it. Hunter Estate. Monday, late October. Firm required a week-long solo contents inventory ahead of the probate auction, and I'd done maybe 40 of these by that point. Easy. I didn't expect this one to be any different going in. Before I started cataloging anything, I walked the ground floor once through just to get the shape of it in my head. Parlor, dining room, a kitchen at the back that still had dishes drying in a rack, a hallway running off toward what I guessed was a mudroom or a pantry. Then I went back outside and walked the perimeter, counting windows floor by floor, checking the roofline against what I'd seen from inside. 3 stories. Flat face on the north side, no dormers, no additions tacked on later. I sketched the footprint in my notebook, a rough rectangle with the porch marked on the south end, because a floor plan saves time once you're 3 rooms deep and trying to remember which door led where. Then I went back in and started at the top, which is how I always do it. The stairs to the 3rd floor were steep and the landing at the top was dim. No fixture working that I could find. Just the gray daylight leaking in from a hallway window at the far end. 2 bedrooms sat at the south end, a bathroom between them, and 1 more bedroom alone at the north end, past a stretch of hall. Every one of them, from what I could see through the doorways, held the same accumulation as downstairs. Furniture stacked on furniture, more of those crates, more clocks, none of it inventoried, none of it thinned out. I stood in the hallway and took a photograph the length of it, door to door. I noted the room count in the log, 2 bedrooms south, 1 bath, 1 bedroom north. Then I turned back toward the south end to start where I always start, at the near end, working away from the stairs. The house was quiet around me, settled and a little too still. The south end took me the rest of Monday. 2 bedrooms and the bath between them, nothing unusual once I got past the first shock of the clutter. A lot of good furniture ruined by neglect. A lot of crates I opened and cataloged and closed again. Chairs stacked on chairs. A dresser with every drawer still full of somebody's folded shirts. By 6 o'clock, I had 4 rooms logged clean and 1 left, the bedroom alone at the north end of the hall. And the light was going. So I called it and went down to reheat something in the microwave and type up the day's photos while they were fresh in my head. Tuesday morning, I went back up and started on the north room. It was the worst of the 4, contents-wise. A brass bed frame stood on its side against the near wall like somebody had meant to move it and given up. An elk head was mounted over the window, dust thick enough in its antlers to look like frost. 2 standing lamps, still wrapped in their original packing, felt leaned together in the corner. And past them, against the far wall, was a wardrobe. Dark wood, tall, the kind that used to double as a closet before houses had real ones. I worked toward it methodically, photographing and logging as I went. Crates first, then the bed frame, then the lamps. Each one its own line in the spreadsheet with a condition note and a photo number. By the time I got to the wardrobe, I'd been in the room the better part of an hour. I opened both doors at once. Heavy wool coats mostly, and a fur-collared overcoat that I made a note to flag for separate appraisal. And behind those, a row of suits still in dry cleaning bags gone yellow at the plastic. Standard enough. I pushed the coats aside on their bar to get a clean shot of the back panel. And that's when I stopped taking pictures. There was a door in the back wall of the wardrobe. Not a panel. Not a decorative seam somebody had routed in to make the piece look older than it was. A door, narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, set into real iron hinges with a real iron latch, black with age. The kind you'd find on a cellar door or a barn. It had no reason to be load-bearing anything. I stood with a coat sleeve still in my hand for a second, looking at it. Then I put the coat back on the bar and lifted the latch. It gave easily, no rust binding it, and swung inward onto a staircase, bare wooden treads, no railing, rising steep into a dark that the light from the room didn't reach far into. I put 1 foot up on the wardrobe floor and looked up the stairwell. Solid treads. No smell of rot, no smell of mildew. Nothing like the smell that had followed me through every other closet and crate in this house for 2 days straight. I backed out and went to the hallway window instead. I looked at the roof line. 3 stories. Flat face, the same line I'd sketched in my notebook the day before after walking the whole perimeter twice. No dormer, no 4th story. Nothing above that roof but sky. I looked at the window a while longer than I needed to. Then I looked back down the hall at the wardrobe, and then at the window again. I went up the stairs anyway. They ended at a small landing and a single room, low enough that the ceiling followed the slant of a roof pitch that by every measurement I'd taken with my own 2 feet on the ground the day before, did not exist. Bare floorboards. 1 window, facing what I'd call north if I hadn't already ruled out the possibility of there being a north wall to put it in. A writing desk sat under the window with a wooden chair pulled up to it, and that was the whole of the furniture. The room was clean. That was the part that got under my collar before anything else did. Not the impossible stairs, not the geometry that didn't work, but the fact that there was no dust on the desk. No cobwebs in the corners where every other room in this house had them thick as felt. No smell of a room shut up for 30 years. which was what every other room smelled like. Mine included by that point, probably. This one smelled like nothing, like it had been swept that morning. I got my phone out and opened the compass app, because it was easier than trusting my own sense of direction after 2 days of turning through identical hallways. The needle settled. North. I walked to the window and looked out anyway. And there was the back field, brown grass gone flat with frost, the line of bare maples at the tree edge, a sky the color of a nickel. It was exactly the view I would have expected from the north face of the house, if the north face of the house had a window in it, which I had confirmed with a tape measure and my own eyes the day before, that it did not. I photographed the room from the landing, the desk and chair, the window, the field through the glass, then turned around and got the staircase looking down toward the wardrobe, and the wardrobe door itself from both sides, open and shut. Back down at the dining room table, I opened the log and typed it in like I would anything else: condition, location, description. Room above 3rd floor north bedroom. No exterior correlate. Origin unclear. I labeled it architectural anomaly, the way I'd have labeled a load-bearing wall in the wrong place or a chimney that didn't connect to any fireplace. Then I moved on to the crates in the 2nd floor hall closet, because that was next on the list. I got through maybe 6 more rooms that day. I didn't stop thinking about it once. By evening, I was back at the dining room table entering catalog data, item numbers, and condition notes ticking down the spreadsheet the way they always do. And every few minutes, without deciding to, I looked up at the ceiling above me, as if I could see straight through the 2nd floor and the 3rd floor to a room that measured out to nothing, sitting up there clean and swept and waiting. Wednesday morning, I brought a tape measure, the good camera, and a compass app I'd downloaded the day before because my phone's built-in one had a habit of drifting. I wanted numbers this time. Actual dimensions, bearings off all 4 walls, a photograph of the window that would hold up if anyone ever asked me to explain what I meant by architectural anomaly. I went through the wardrobe, up the stairs, and stopped on the landing with one foot still on the top step. The chair wasn't where it had been. In my photographs from the day before, it stood beside the right side of the desk, angled toward it, ready to be pulled out and used. Now it was against the far wall, 6 feet back, facing the desk straight on. And in the center of the desk, where there had been nothing at all, there was a glass of water. I stood in the doorway for a few seconds longer than I needed to. I told myself I'd misremembered the chair's position, that I'd looked at the photo once on a small screen in bad light, and built the rest from memory. I told myself I might have carried the glass up myself, set it down, forgotten. I do a lot of solitary work. I've forgotten things before. I photographed the chair where it stood before I touched it. I photographed the glass on the desk, centered, no ring of condensation beneath it, no smear where a hand might have set it down twice. Then I picked it up. The water was cold, not room temperature, not the mild cool a glass gets sitting out in an unheated house in late October. It was cold the way water is cold straight out of a tap that's been run a minute, or out of a refrigerator. Cold like it had been poured recently. I stood there holding it, feeling that cold work through the glass and into my palm, and I did not have an explanation that fit. I set the glass back down exactly where it had been and photographed it again, this time with my hand still faintly visible at the edge of the frame, because I wanted a record that I'd handled it and put it back. I checked the walls, all 4 methodically, the way I'd check a wall for a hidden switch or a seam in wallpaper, running my palm along the plaster at waist height, then again at floor level, then along the ceiling where it sloped down with the roof line. Plaster over lath, solid the whole way around. No gaps, no grills, no access panel behind the desk or under the window. The floorboards ran continuous. No trap, no loose board that gave under my weight. The only way in or out of that room was the staircase I'd just climbed, through the wardrobe, through the bedroom below. I went back downstairs and did what I was there to do. Second floor linen closets, a run of crated glassware in the upstairs hall that turned out to be a full set of Haviland china. Undamaged, better than anything else in the house. I logged item numbers. I estimated values. I did not write anything about the chair or the glass in the inventory, because the inventory is for the estate, and the estate does not include a room that isn't on the house. I went back up mid-afternoon anyway, telling myself it was to recheck my measurements against the photographs. The chair was still against the far wall. The glass was still on the desk, and when I touched it again, it was still cold. Though by then, enough hours had passed that any water left standing in an unheated room should have come up to match the air around it. It hadn't. I went up a third time before I left for the night, mostly because I couldn't make myself not. The room hadn't changed since the afternoon. I stood there and touched the glass one more time, still cold, the same cold, no different than it had been at 8 in the morning, and set it back down on the desk in the same spot, and went down the stairs and through the wardrobe without writing anything new in my log. Thursday morning, I went straight up, past the wardrobe, up the narrow stairs, and I did not look at the chair first. I went to the desk. The single drawer stuck a little when I pulled it, and inside it was a ledger. Cloth-bound, dark green, under a layer of handling that had gone soft and gray at the corners, the spine worn all the way through to the board underneath. I sat down. The chair was still against the far wall where it had been the day before and the day before that, and I didn't move it back. I carried it over, sat, and opened the ledger flat on the desk. The first entry was dated in early October, 30 years before. The handwriting was small and even, tight and controlled. A man who wrote a great deal and never in a hurry. The last entry, near the back, was dated 3 weeks before Bernard Hunter died. I flipped through the pages between the two and understood almost immediately that I was not looking at a diary. Each entry was a date and then 2 or 3 lines, sometimes 4, describing something seen. Not the field behind the house, not Vermont at all. Streets, intersections, a building facade with a number visible over the door. Crowds, described in volume, direction, density, never as people he knew. One entry read, Delancey Street, fire, 3rd floor, corner unit, 3 engines. Woman on the fire escape did not get down. I had my phone out before I'd finished reading it a second time. I searched the street name and the rough date and sat there while the results loaded, telling myself I already knew what I'd find. Nothing. Then the archive came up. An apartment fire, same block, same date. 3 engines dispatched, confirmed in the article. A name, a woman, 41 years old, did not make it out of a 3rd floor unit, same floor Hunter had written down. I checked 4 more. A street collapse in Chicago, an intersection accident in Baltimore with the cross streets named, a building evacuation in Philadelphia with the fire department's response time given almost to the minute. Every one of them was in the newspapers, on the dates Hunter had recorded, at the locations he'd named. The details he'd written down sat there in black and white on my phone screen, like he'd copied them off the article instead of the other way around. I did not find a single entry that didn't check out. I looked for one. I wanted one that was wrong. I needed him to be making things up. I set the phone down and looked at the window, sitting where he must have sat, at the desk he must have used for 30 years. For several minutes, it showed exactly what it had shown me the first day. The back field, the bare maples at the tree line, the same flat gray sky. Nothing moving in it, because there was nothing there to move. Then the light in the room changed, though there was no cloud, and it wasn't afternoon by more than an hour. And the field was gone. In its place was a street, narrow, cobbled or close to it. A shop with a green awning pulled halfway down, a sedan parked nose in against the curb. A man walked a small dog along the far side, a terrier, its legs going fast to keep up, and his coat moved against a wind that did not touch anything in the room I was sitting in. I did not feel a draft. I felt nothing. The coat moved anyway, and it moved the way real fabric moves, not the flat sliding motion of something projected. The man and the dog went out of the frame to the left. A child on the pavement. I hadn't noticed the child until then. Small, maybe 7, in a red coat. Stopped walking. Stopped completely, both feet planted, and turned, and looked up. Not around. Up. Directly at the window. At me. The child held that look a long time, and I did not move. And then the field was back, gray and flat and empty, and my hands were shaking against the edge of the ledger badly enough that the pages trembled with them. I made myself keep reading instead of doing anything else, because I did not have a next step that wasn't reading. The early entries, going back years, were plain observation and nothing more. Dated, located, described. No comment on how or why, the way you'd log weather. Somewhere in, the tone shifted. He stopped simply recording what appeared and started choosing it. Entries began saying things like, held on the Denver intersection, or moved off the fire, nothing further, and stayed on the harbor scene instead. Decisions, made about a window that was supposed to only show him a field. 8 years in, roughly by my count of the dated pages. Stayed too long on the Nakamura Street. Felt the pull again. Did not open the window. The phrase appeared 3 more times after that. Always the same 2 words, never explained. He never once wrote down what the pull was. Further on, opened the window 6 inches on the Harlow scene. Dropped the marble. Confirmed it lands. I read that line twice and then sat very still with it. Not a viewing surface. An opening. The last section of the ledger was the last 10 entries, and they were dated within 2 months of his death. In those, he was choosing streets deliberately. Before something happened, not during, watching for it. He dropped things to startle drivers before the moment they'd swerve. He leaned in and shouted a warning, and wrote it down flatly, the way you'd note whether a switch worked. He was testing what the window would let him do, entry by entry, the way I test a lock. The final entry was short, and the hand was wrong. Every other page in that ledger held the same small, even, unhurried lettering, 30 years of it, without variation. The last one was heavier, pressed hard enough in places to nearly go through the paper, the letters uneven, leaning against each other like they'd been written by someone whose hand would not hold still. I opened it all the way. I put my hand through. I cannot describe what I touched. I will not go back up. I closed the ledger on that entry and set it down on the desk, careful, the way you set down something you don't want to wake. And I sat there looking at the window for a long time. It showed the back field, the maples, bare, the gray sky, unchanged. Nothing in it moved. I came down the stairs, through the wardrobe, and into the north bedroom, and I made myself walk the rest of the way at a normal pace. No reason to run. Nothing had happened yet that would justify running, and I have a policy about that, or I did. The dining room table was where I'd left my paperwork spread out in the order I keep it. Ground floor, second floor, room by room, oldest photographs at the bottom of each stack. I'd been careful about that order all week. It's the only part of the job that stays the same no matter what house I'm in. The pages weren't in that order anymore. Someone had turned the top of the stack forward, past the second floor, into the section I hadn't started. Blank template pages for rooms I hadn't set foot in yet, fanned open like a hand of cards. My pen was on the floor, 4 or 5 feet from the table, near the base of the china cabinet. I don't drop pens. I clip them to the binder. I'd been alone in the house since Monday. I had not heard the front door. I had not heard footsteps. I had been upstairs for most of the afternoon with the door to the wardrobe room shut behind me. There's no way down from that room that doesn't go through the bedroom, through the hall, past the stairs. I would have heard any of it. I picked the pen up. I straightened the pages back into order, squared the edges the way I always do, and did it slowly, giving my hands something ordinary to do. Then I checked my phone. I left it face down on the table when I went up, on silent, because I don't like it buzzing at me while I work. There was a photograph in the camera roll I hadn't taken. It was me. Sitting at the desk upstairs, the ledger open in front of me, my head bent over it the way I read anything I'm concentrating on. The angle was from above and slightly to the side. Looking down into the room, down onto the crown of my own head and the desk and the ledger's open pages, close enough that I could make out the cloth binding, the line of my shoulders, the collar of my jacket. It was not a photograph taken from inside the room. There was no place inside that room to stand and get that angle. It was taken through the window, from outside it, from above the sill, looking in and down, the way you'd look through a window if you were something tall enough to look down through it rather than across. The timestamp read 3:11 p.m. I checked it against my memory without wanting to. 3:11 was somewhere in the middle of the stretch where I'd been sitting at that desk with the window showing me a street I didn't know. A green awning, a man walking a small dog, right up until a child on the pavement stopped and looked up at me. I stood in the dining room, holding the phone with both hands. The image wasn't blurred. It wasn't a smear of light or a trick of a dirty lens or any of the ordinary explanations I keep in reserve for when a photograph looks wrong. It was sharp. My face was sharp. You could read the concentration on it. Whatever had taken that photograph had been on the other side of the glass. At the same time, I was on my side of it, looking out at a street that shouldn't have been outside a window on the 3rd floor of a house in Vermont. I had thought I was the one doing the watching. I sat there for a long moment turning that over, and it did not turn into anything easier. I went back up. I didn't decide to. I put the phone in my pocket, and I went up the stairs, through the bedroom, into the wardrobe, up the narrow staircase behind the coats, and by the time I reached the landing at the top, I already knew, before I could see it, that the window was showing something. It was a hospital corridor. Fluorescent panels ran the length of the ceiling in a long, even row, that flat, institutional white that makes everyone under it look a little ill. A nurse's station sat partway down on the left, empty, a rolling chair pushed in at an angle. Supply carts lined the wall opposite. Gray plastic drawers stacked 3 high, wheels locked. The corridor ran on past them and ended, a long way off, at a set of double doors with round wire glass windows. It didn't flicker. It didn't fade in the way the field usually held and then gave way to something else. It was simply there, already showing, before I'd crossed the room to the desk. steady, clear, waiting. There was a figure standing at the far end, in front of the double doors. It was tall, well over 6 feet, I'd estimate, judging it against the door frame behind it. But the proportions were off in a way I couldn't pin down, even looking directly at it. The arms were too long for the torso. The head sat at an angle no neck holds on its own, tipped, listening rather than looking, except it was looking. It wore what read at a glance as a dark coat, except the edges of it moved. Not with any wind. There was no wind in that corridor. The air in it was dead and still. Nothing else in the frame so much as shifted. But the hem and the shoulders of that coat stirred anyway, the way smoke stirs. It wasn't walking down the corridor toward the double doors or away from them. It was standing exactly where it was, facing the window, facing me, the way I had been sitting at this desk for a week, now facing scenes I had no business seeing. It had been standing there before I got to the desk, before I'd even reached the top of the stairs. It hadn't turned to notice the window come alive with a viewer. It had already been oriented toward it, waiting. I stood there and it stood there, and for a few seconds, neither of us did anything. And I thought, with a strange thin clarity, that I finally understood what the child on the pavement had felt when she stopped and looked up. Then it raised one hand. Too many joints in it, the fingers folding wrong at the last knuckle, and pressed it flat against the glass from its side. The window bowed. I saw it happen, saw the pane flex inward toward me, and the frame around it flex outward to meet the pressure. Wood groaning at the corners like it was taking a weight it was never built to hold. I got both hands on the frame and pushed down, and the latch, the actual hardware, the metal plate and the catch, bolted into the sill like it had been there since the house was built. Turned loose under my fingers. No resistance, no click. It turned the way a screw turns when the threads have worn through, spinning free of anything to hold on to. The bottom rail kept rising, not fast. It came up against my weight the way a car jack comes up, slow and total, an inch and then another inch. And I could feel it through my palms. Not the wood fighting me, the wood being pushed, something underneath the movement that had nothing to do with old hinges settling or a frame swollen with damp. I put my knee against the sill and my full weight on the rail, and it kept coming anyway. It kept coming because whatever was pushing did not care how much of me was pushing back. I didn't decide to grab the ledger. I just had it in my hand. I shoved the spine into the gap where the rail met the sill, wedged it down hard with the heel of my palm, and threw myself against the frame on top of it. Wood on wood, the ledger's cloth binding grinding between them. And for 1 second the rail kept climbing against the both of us. I felt it lift the book, felt the whole assembly shudder like it was going to split the spine and come through anyway. And then it stopped. It stopped like something deciding to wait, not giving up. I held it there. Both hands flat on the frame, my forearm laid across the top rail, my weight down through my shoulders into wood that had gone from groaning to silent in the space of a breath. I did not look at the glass. I looked at my own hands, at the grain of the sill, at anything that was mine to look at. And I counted. Not out loud, just a number running somewhere behind my eyes. Until the pressure under my palms went from present to absent. Until there was nothing pushing back anymore, and it was only a window again, only wood and glass and a room that smelled like nothing, the way it always had. I did not test it. I did not lift my weight to see if it would hold on its own. I worked the ledger free an inch at a time, my forearm still bearing down on the frame the whole time, until the book came loose in my hand and the window stayed where it was. Shut or close enough to shut that I wasn't going to argue with it. I tucked the ledger under my arm. I backed toward the door without turning my back on the glass fully, and only once I had the door frame under my hand did I let myself turn around. I went down the stairs without stopping. I didn't check my footing on the narrow treads, didn't slow at the landing, and didn't glance back up at the room, though part of me wanted to know it had shut behind me. I came out through the coats into the wardrobe and pushed the doors open into the bedroom, into ordinary gray afternoon light falling through an ordinary window that faced an ordinary field. And I did not stop there either. Down the second flight, down the first. My own footsteps on the stairs were the only sound in the house, and I was grateful for that in a way I didn't examine. The dining room table was exactly as I'd left it. My paperwork fanned out where I'd been working through the room by room before any of this started, and I left it there. I left all of it. The clipboard, the printed forms, 3 days of careful photographs I would apparently not be finishing. I picked up my laptop and closed it under one arm, next to the ledger, and I got my keys off the table where I always left them, by habit. By the same habit that had me starting at the top of a house and working down. I did not look back up the stairwell on my way to the door. Outside, the air had that flat, mineral cold that comes before real dark in late October, and the gravel under my shoes sounded too loud. And I got into the car and put the ledger on the passenger seat and did not look at the house in the rearview mirror while I turned the key. The gravel road ran straight for a while and then curved through the tree line, bare maples going by close on both sides, branches like something reaching without quite touching. And I kept my eyes on the road in front of the hood and my hands too tight on the wheel, and did not check the mirror, not once, the whole length of it. I pulled out onto Route 12, and the estate went behind the trees and was gone. And the ledger sat on the seat beside me where I hadn't decided to put it. And I drove. Elm Street was mostly closed by the time I got there. A hardware store and a diner with its neon turned off. And I pulled into the gas station because it had lights on and a phone signal, and I needed both of those things more than I needed gas. I sat in the car with the engine still running and called the office before I could think of a reason not to. My supervisor picked up on the third ring, same as always. "Fuller, you're early. Thought you had a week out there. The upper floors have significant structural instability," I said. "I can't complete the assessment safely." There was a pause on his end, the kind where I could hear him deciding how much this was going to cost him in scheduling. "How significant?" "Significant enough that I'm not going back up," I said. "Floor's third story, north end. I'd want an engineer in there before anyone else walks it." "You want to file an incident report?" "A partial inventory will cover it," I said. "Ground floor and second floor are done, thorough. I'll mark the third as inaccessible." He said fine, said he'd note it. Said something about the auction timeline that I didn't really hear because I was watching a moth throwing itself against the gas station's overhead light over and over. I said I'd have the report in by morning, and he said good. And none of it was a lie exactly, maybe 90 seconds, start to finish. I just left most of it out. I got the motel room on the same street, paid cash, didn't ask questions, and wasn't asked any. I sat at a particle board desk that wobbled under the laptop and wrote the report the way I write every report. Clean columns, dates, condition notes, photographs numbered and referenced by room. Ground floor, parlor, dining room, kitchen, study. Second floor, 4 bedrooms, a sitting room, a bath with fixtures original to the house and worth noting for that alone. I was accurate. Anyone reading it would think I'd done careful work on the 2 floors I let myself write about. 3rd floor, I wrote, inaccessible due to structural concern. Recommend engineering assessment prior to any further work. I did not write wardrobe. I did not write staircase or window or ledger. The ledger was in my bag on the floor by the bed the whole time I was writing, and I didn't look at it, and I didn't open it. And when I was done with the report, I closed the laptop and turned off the light and lay there listening to a truck idle somewhere out on the street for a long time before I slept. In the morning, I drove back to Burlington, and I did not take the turn for the gravel road. I didn't even slow down going past it. I kept my eyes on the double yellow line and my hands at 10 and 2, and let the turnoff go by in the mirror the same way I hadn't let myself look at the house the night before. Somewhere past Woodstock, the radio came back in range, some man talking about high school football, and I let it fill the car instead of my own thinking. 2 weeks went by. I had other properties. I inventoried a farmhouse outside Barre with water damage in the cellar and a widow who wanted to talk about her husband's tools for 40 minutes before I could get to the crawl space. I filed my reports on time. Nobody at the office asked me anything further about the Hunter place. The file had my partial inventory in it and a note that the estate would need a second contractor for the 3rd floor. And as far as the firm was concerned, the matter was closed. The estate went to auction under a probate order, since there was no family left to argue about it. A second contractor went out and did the 3rd floor I hadn't done. I never asked him what he found up there, and he never mentioned anything to me. I told myself that meant nothing, that a wardrobe with a false back and a staircase going nowhere a house should have room for isn't something a contractor notes on a form unless he happens to open exactly that wardrobe on exactly that visit. Maybe he didn't. The house sold the first day it was listed. I saw the number when it came through the file, well above the assessed asking price, which for a property with a flagged structural concern on record was unusual enough that I actually asked someone about it, one of the women in records, over the partition between our desks. Who bought the Hunter place? She scrolled, frowned a little at her screen. Trust purchase, she said. Anonymous. We don't get a name on those. It comes through the attorney, and the attorney doesn't have to disclose the beneficiary unless the court asks. Can we ask? We could, but why would we? It's sold. Files closed. She looked up at me then. Not unkindly, the way you look at someone who's asking a question that doesn't have a business reason behind it. Why, you want to buy it back? I said no, I was just curious, and went back to my desk. I didn't request anything further, because there wasn't a form for what I actually wanted to know. Who wanted a house like that badly enough to pay over asking with a structural flag still on the record, whether they knew what was in the wardrobe on the 3rd floor? And whether it mattered to them one way or the other. The ledger came home with me the first night without my ever deciding it would. It was under my arm going down the stairs, and it was still under my arm getting into the car. And by the time I noticed I was carrying it, it felt too late to have done anything else with it. There was no clean place to leave a thing like that, no drop box, no lost and found. So it came to Burlington. It sat on the kitchen counter for 2 days, next to the mail I hadn't opened, until I moved it to the bookshelf in the living room, because it looked wrong on the counter. Looked like something that ought to be shelved. It sat on the bookshelf for most of a week, spine out, the cloth worn through in that pale line down the middle. Then one night, I picked it up to move it somewhere else, and ended up carrying it into the bedroom instead, setting it on the nightstand. I told myself it would stay there until I decided what to do with it. though I hadn't opened it once since the afternoon I read it at that desk, with the north window behind me showing a field that wasn't there. I set it down on the nightstand now, the cloth cover facing up, and turned off the lamp and lay back in the dark of my own apartment, 2 weeks out from that gravel road, and closed my eyes. The first time it happened, I told myself it was sleepwalking, plain and simple. I woke up standing at the living room window with my hand flat against the cold glass, looking down at Maple Street the way I'd looked at it 100 nights before. The same parked cars, the same pharmacy sign glowing red on the corner, the neon caught in the wet asphalt. I didn't remember getting out of bed. I didn't remember crossing the apartment, which is not large, but is large enough that a person should notice himself walking through it. I stood there for I don't know how long before I woke up enough to notice I was standing there at all. And then I went back to bed and didn't tell anyone, because there wasn't anyone to tell and no form for it either. The second time was the same. Same window, same street, same hand already in place before I came back into myself. I checked the latch both times. Locked. I told myself that meant something. The ledger stayed on the nightstand through all of it. I hadn't opened it since Vermont. I hadn't opened it, hadn't wanted to. Most nights I'd gone out of my way to set it face down so I wouldn't see the cloth cover worn through in that pale line before I turned off the lamp. The third time was a Wednesday. I know it was a Wednesday because I'd worked a half day, and the half day is still logged somewhere in my firm's system, time-stamped, ordinary. A Wednesday like any other. I woke up at the window with my hand on the latch. The latch was cold. Not the ordinary cold of an old window in late autumn that comes through the glass and the frame both and settles into the metal overnight. I know that cold. I've felt it every night for 3 weeks, and it never surprised me. This was a different cold, sharper, localized, as if something colder than the window had just touched it. It sat under my fingers like a fact I hadn't asked for. The ledger was open on the sill beside me. I hadn't taken it from the nightstand. I have no memory of crossing to the bedroom, no memory of picking it up, no memory of carrying it back through the apartment and setting it down and opening it to a particular page. Yet there it was, lying flat, spine up, open to the last entry in Bernard Hunter's hand. The pressure heavier, the letters gone uneven. I opened it all the way. I put my hand through. I cannot describe what I touched. I will not go back up. I did not go back up. I had told myself, driving away from that gravel road 3 weeks ago, that I would not go back up, and I haven't, not once, not to that house. I have kept every promise I know how to keep. But I was standing at my own window in my own apartment in Burlington, Vermont. And when I looked down, the street was not Maple Street. It was narrow, first of all. Narrower than any street in my building's part of town, hemmed in on both sides by low buildings with flat brick faces and windows set close together, older than anything in my part of town. A street lamp stood on the corner with a fixture I didn't recognize. An iron arm curved the wrong way, throwing a colder light than the sodium orange Burlington uses. A car was parked along the curb, dark, its shape unfamiliar to me. I could see a license plate on it, clear as anything, and could not read a single character on it. Not because it was too far, but because my eyes simply would not resolve it. The image had depth to it. It was not a reflection. I know what my own window throws back at 2 a.m, the ghost of the lamp behind me, the shape of my own shoulder. And it was not a photograph, flat and settled behind glass. It moved the way a real place moves, subtly, at the edges, a shadow shifting somewhere off to the side, where a shadow has no business shifting on its own. There should have been wind. Whatever season that street belonged to, there should have been something moving in it, A sign, a scrap of paper, a coat. I felt none. My own window was still. My own apartment was still. Whatever was down there existed at a temperature and a stillness all its own, sealed off from mine by nothing thicker than a single pane of glass and the cold latch under my fingers. I did not know how long I'd been standing there before I woke into myself enough to notice the cold under my hand. I do not know, even now, whether the latch was locked or turned. Lying in the dark afterward, my heart going too fast for a man doing nothing more than standing still. It wasn't the street that stayed with me, or the strangeness of the street, but the plain mechanical fact of the latch itself. A small brass turn no bigger than a coin, my hand resting on it in a position that could have been a man about to open a window, or a man who already had. I stood there. The ledger lay open beside me on the sill, its pages catching what little light came through from the street that wasn't mine. Bernard Hunter's last unsteady sentence facing up at the ceiling of my own apartment, as if it had been waiting there all along for me to read it a second time. I did not turn to look at the clock. I did not call out, though there was no one to call to. I only stood there with the cold brass under my fingers and the narrow street below me holding its breath in a wind I couldn't feel. And I let myself understand, finally, that I did not know, could not have said. Not to my supervisor, not to anyone who might have asked me later how it happened, whether my hand had already turned the latch, or whether it was only, for now, still resting there.